And welcome to part 2 of the Cascadia in-depth review of the volcanic activity through the Cascadia range, and fault shift and tremors and all such related things. I'll get myself moved over here. We have some squiggly lines to look at, and not the ones on my face. So we had a look at Mount Hood. We were looking at the uplift fracturing on the 13th, and this speaks to magma infill. There's a lot of tremors there as well. Let's see if we can get things to open. Let's see if we can get function back. There we are. So we looked at this one already, and now to sisters. In the sisters, that's a complex down there. That's why it's sisters, not just one. And this is the wife. I'm not sure how the wife gets along with the sister, but there's a husband involved down there as well. This wife is pretty busy. There's a lot of sharp remarks being made, shown by vertical lines, so it's not too much different from Mount St. Helens. Here's a decent look at Sisters itself from the 30th. So we can see there's some significant activity at Sisters as well. And that's the one I talked about being involved in a study, the Sisters area being involved in a study from 1997 to 2003, as I recall. Jumping down to Newberry, that's our next major point. This is Newberry on the 10th, and this is a huge jump in activity, folks. That's a lot of activity from Newberry. I've never seen it this heavy before, so we're hitting new highs. This is from, it's from Newberry. There's multiple sites there. This is Newberry craters. Also, this is on the 8th. So it's not the only day it's been active on the 13th or on the 10th, but also on the 8th. That's a very heavy period of activity right at the very top, too. And this is from the 5th at Newberry. So this is a lot of activity. This is actually matching up pretty nicely to what we're seeing at Mount St. Helens. So Mount St. Helens' quality or level of activity is advanced at times, at least. That same level is being met at Newberry. The Crater Lake sites were all down for a few weeks in June and July. We were using Cinnamon Butte, and that's between Newberry and Crater Lake. And this is the 30th of June. We see a bunch of uplift fracturing. We see a bunch of repetitive machine-made signals. I'm not sure what these are caused by, but this is the natural activity there and these tremors here. So this is uplift fracturing in this area, and this is magma infill that we're seeing underlying all these heavier lines that relates to magma incoming. And this is Cinnamon Butte on the 26th of June, of course. Lots of uplift fracturing, lots of magma infill tremors. Very busy, quite a bit busier than we've ever seen Cinnamon Butte before. In this period, there's a lot of active, highly active areas. These are big uplift signals that the computer is highlighting for the seismologist to look at. So that's Cinnamon Butte on the 7th and on the 9th. So gives you a good idea of what's been going on. It's not been inactive south of Newberry. It's been very active, and Crater Lake is back online on the 13th, and it's showing a lot of activity. So this is some of the highest level activity we've ever seen at Crater Lake. So Crater Lake very likely has been busy. This is another one. This is from the 15th. This is from the north side of Crater Lake. Different sides will give you different looks, different levels of activity. Wizard Island is like the rising dome of Mount St. Helens. It's the rising center part of the caldera that the lake is in, that Crater Lake is in. And I've never seen even a quarter of this level of activity from Wizard Island and Crater Lake before the 15th. So this describes 2 hours of major magma infill causing uplift fracturing. And it's my guess the massive increases at Cinnamon Butte and seeing what we're seeing and coming back on, Crater Lake activity must have been really quite high during this period. That's what the surrounding activity indicates, and what the activity indicates when we get back on and finally get some good data. So 2 hours of major uplift fracturing infill at Wizard Island and Crater Lake. It's from Wizard Island on the 12th. I think the 12th is when this came back online. Other than that, we had no signals from Crater Lake. This is east of Mount Shasta. Now, Mount Shasta, it's getting harder and harder to get good data there, so I'm showing you some older data mixed in. I've been doing that all the way through, though, so this shouldn't be a surprise. This is from the 26th of June, and it's east of Mount Shasta. So, close proximity site east of Mount Shasta, kind of at the east base of Mount Shasta. Further to the east-southeast, actually, is Timbered Crater. Timbered Crater on the 26th. This area is all volcanic, and there's large volcanic fields in the area east of Mount Shasta as well, over to Medicine Lake. Lots of volcanic areas. The there's a big lava bed state park there as well. Tumawee or something like that. Anyway, I missed Cinnamon Butte on the 25th apparently, so I stuck it in here. There it is. Now you've seen it. Now it's gone. And east-southeast of Mount Shasta on the 24th of June. So you can see that it has been very active around Mount Shasta. That's 3 different sites now. Black Butte on the 24th of June. That's the 4th site. So it's busy all around Mount Shasta. And this is Crater Lake on the 21st. This is the last day before all the sites at Crater Lake went down. So this was our last good look at Crater Lake. The one that I saved. Hambone is east-southeast of Mount Shasta. This is on the 26th of June. The Hambone Site is an old rail transfer site, apparently. And this is on the 28th of June at the Hambone Site again. So we've got some major uplift fracturing associated with magma infill at this site. It's quite a ways away from Mount Shasta, yet it's still showing that level of infill. And so is Timbered Crater on the 7th. So we're continuing forward in time. Lots of magma infill showing uplift fracturing, magma infill up here, small earthquake there, getting into tremors, and then this period is all uplift fracturing. So that's major activity. This is east of McLeod on the 9th, when we could get some through the Northern California seismic data system. So that's east of McLeod. There's a park there. This is Timbered Crater on the 9th. So we continued to see significant infill all around Mount Shasta. So that continued much the same through the 15th. And now let's move to Mount Lassen. And this site, which is actually a little bit north of Mount Lassen, only shows high level activity. And it's been showing this daily for over a month. Really, it's a couple of months at least. The duration of the high level of activity is increasing on average over time. This is Mount Lassen on the 10th. So that's a lot of steam blowing off along with uplift fracturing. And that's what we expect. Mount Lassen on the 13th. We've got 3 of these to show you. There's more of them, but I just thought I'd show you 3. And this is the 15th. So there you go. There's a lot of activity on Mount Lassen, and it's pretty regular. Lake Almanor is the very southern limit of the Cascade Range, and it is the transition zone defined by geologic changes. It had 2 earthquakes over magnitude 5 within 8 hours. About 5 weeks ago. It's actually about 2 months ago. I think it was the 12th. 2 months ago on the 12th, so May 12th. It continues to have small earthquakes, and those 2 earthquakes fulfilled the early warning criteria I set for seeing increased earthquake activity. The warning points harder at California than anywhere else. Now, we did have a big earthquake in Alaska today, but that was well out on the peninsula. We're going to see some of that force transfer inland, move towards Anchorage. Some of that may move down the coast, but most of the force has been transferring out through the northeast, some of it coming down through Alberta and south, coming into following the Creighton edge coming into Yellowstone. So we'll see what happens with that. There's 3 force pathways that that's 8.2 earthquake should split into, and the major ones are north and east, based on the last 2 years of history. I used a later, back to Lake Almanor, I used a later 4.5 from Lake Almanor to assess the amplitude of many NorCal sites, especially those of the Pine Grove and around the Pine Grove supervolcano, which is 50 miles wide, and those around Lake Tahoe and Reno. And the agencies have since turned down a bunch of those seismographs, and I can easily prove this. I've got lots of saved data. I waited for a couple of weeks until I had a lot of data from the Pine Grove supervolcano, and I saved it. So I established a pattern of high intensity activity in the area, a high level of magma infill in the Pine Grove supervolcano and surrounding areas. So that's established in the data package that I've saved. And now it's been turned down. And then what I did was I double checked all of the seismograms against the propagated signal from the Lake Almanor 4.5. So all of that's been well covered, and it remains well documented. So I can prove this. The agencies, without good reason other than they perhaps wanted to quell public fears in the area of Reno and Lake Tahoe, worried about this potential supervolcano that I've identified. They've turned down a whole bunch of those sites in those areas. So I can still read between the lines and see what's going on, but it doesn't leave a lot to present in regards to new information. So most of the seismograms in that area are reinstalled, reset at a lower amplitude. A lower amplitude reset. So now we're going to look at the tremors along the near shoreline sites. If we're seeing subduction, it's going to show in shoreline tremors, just as they do in the Pacific Northwest when they were talking about the slow slip and showing the slow slip tremors. But we've proven over and over that there's a great many more slow slip tremors, and these are actually fast creep tremors now, in California, and there's quite a bit more in Washington and Oregon than they've been displaying, by a value of about 100 times more. So Forks, Washington, on the Olympic Peninsula. Forks, Washington. Here we are. And this is from the 13th. So that's a lot of activity on the 13th, right on the shoreline. Southern end of the Olympic Peninsula on the west coast. This is further south near Nema, Washington. That's also on the 15th. That's a lot of tremor activity along the shoreline. So catching these midway often preserves data that's otherwise modified by the agencies later on. That's why you see half seismograms a lot of the times. Nehalem, Oregon. here we are, and we're seeing Nehalem with a lot of small earthquakes and a lot of smaller tremors as well. This is not an atypical site. It's often this busy. And this is Logsdon, Oregon. Logsdon, Oregon. There's a lot of activity there. So we'll just let you have a look at that. This is very unusually high activity on the 15th. And this is Swissholm. Now, when you look at this site, you can see there's nothing showing on the baseline in between these tremors. That means the site is way turned down. But look at the number of tremors. This is reporting at probably about 10, 15, maybe at best 20% of normal value. And look at the size of the tremors. That should be at least 5 times larger, at least, and maybe 10 times larger. It's a lot of activity at Swissholm, right on the coast. And we have Edson Butte. So lots of activity there as well, lots of tremors. And I'm just going to zip right down to the bottom because I saved one that I meant to. Well, I was supposed to get rid of this program. It's still there. Aberdeen. Wanted to show Aberdeen, and I'll go back up to the top. Sorry, I misplaced this seismogram. This is on the 15th as well. So later on the 15th, this activity disappeared, so I managed to find this that I'd sent to someone else. So I had saved the data. Programs, and more programs. Here we are. Edson Butte, a lot of light tremors at Powers. We're a little more inland at Powers. But that's a lot of activity, and that's not related to known coastline faults, except for it would be the fault of the contact point between the continental plate and the oceanic plate, Pacific plate. And from here, now I'm not disagreeing with the name of the plate. I'm just saying it's an oceanic plate that's involved. From here we move to NorCal near the coastal sites. And the most prominent for many weeks was McKinleyville. So McKinleyville is a little north of Ferndale. South of Ferndale is where we had the 6.5 earthquake on the 22nd of December 2022 that started or made more obvious the subduction that was going on in California. This is Rockport right on the coast, further south. Lots of tremors, small earthquakes at Rockport. This is McKinleyville on the 24th. And I think it's a little over amplitude. Now, we should have a little look at this. You can see the baselines are a little bit elevated, so this is probably a little bit over amplitude at McKinleyville, but it's not extremely over. So there's a lot of activity there, but it looks larger than it is. McKinleyville on the 27th and on the 29th. Here on the 29th, we see the baseline values drop in size. So they've turned down the seismogram, I believe, on the 29th. Fort Bragg on the 28th. And that's as far as we're going to go down the coast. There's tremors all down the California coast. The subduction is not stopping, but this, just because we get to the Mendocino Ridge, that's the expected southern extent of the Great Cascadia earthquake, and the Cascades range stops there at Mount Lassen and actually at Mount Almanor. So I haven't collected data because it gets into California, more California data, and we're going to do a separate program on that because California is getting worse as well. But this concludes looking in depth at the Cascade Range. The subduction is caused, I'm just going to review the process. The subduction is caused by North America moving into the Pacific over top of the oceanic plates. And this is proven by GPS measurements, the process of geodesy, which absolutely proves this is the mechanism. And the subduction is all around the Pacific Ocean, coming in with the continents coming in from every side. The mid-Atlantic rift is spreading, and both sides of the Pacific, continents on both sides of the mid-Atlantic rift, are drifting into the Pacific. It's a process called continental drift, and there's a lot of speculation as to why that occurs. But it's not because magma is forcing up between the cracks. That's just a passive process of backfilling a crack. Liquid cannot hydraulically force massive plates apart unless it's because it's an open system. There's no way to generate pressure. It's not like it's a steam container or an enclosed hydraulic cylinder or something like that. So it can't be pushed apart by the process of hydraulics because there's no encapsulation. So that subduction is ongoing. It's accelerating. It's getting busier through the Cascades Range. We've got visible steam most days sitting as a cap on top of Mount Rainier. On satellite imagery, we've caught a lot of steam being produced through the Cascade Range, and it's not slowing down. This is continuing. So we've got continued reactivation of the Cascade Range. It's not pronounced, but you can see major changes at Newberry and at Crater Lake. Mount Shasta has gotten busier. Mount Hood has periods of activity. Mount St. Helens is significantly more active over the last month. So it's building. It's continuing to build up. When will we get to the Great Cascadia earthquake? I can't predict that. I tried once, but I can't predict it. We're going to see other greater activity before we see the Cascadia megaquake. I believe we're going to see a couple of very large earthquakes in California, and I'm saying California. It could be northern Mexico, and it could be southern Mexico. We're going to see, but the reason I'm pointing to the southern part of North America is because it moves faster than the northern or central part of North America along the west coast. So the drift is to the southwest, but there's a bit of a swing at the southern end as well. And we're seeing some of the force of North America moving with this earthquake even that we had today in Alaska. There's a lot of pressure on the continent, and the continent is moving. It's underway, and that's why we have volcanoes at yellow status through the. I think there's 4 of them now, and plus they were showing Shishaldin at red today, which is new. Red aviation flights. So we're seeing larger earthquakes. 8.2 is not a small earthquake by any means. I know the agencies had it at a magnitude smaller, but I gave all the rationale as to why I believe it's much bigger, and I believe the science supports that. I always provide my rationales for what I present. So I hope you've enjoyed this in-depth review of the Cascades Range. I don't see anything happening imminently for BC, Washington, or Oregon. Even with this California or with this Alaska earthquake that we just had, that force gets split into 3 pathways, and that's going to diminish anything coming down the coast. All right. So or coming down inland into Yellowstone. So we'll see you next time on Feed My Sheep, Earthquake Reports, and more. And I don't think I'm going to do another program today, but bye for now, and we'll see if we can get a California program up soon.